this is what we refer to as the patient life cycle. And as I said before, it's not surprising that we have this congruence because it begins with attraction. And attraction is, as we're going to go through these four stations, attraction isn't just the art of showing people what it is that you have and that you do. It's with the intention of allowing the people to have an interaction with you so that they can then attract others in their own community. So this is what's known as the concentric circle model. And what it is that the ripple effect of where you throw the pebble in the flat pond has a ripple effect that occurs. So attraction is about having an everyday experience so that the attraction is based upon an outcome or a vision. The clinical assessment, which is the excellence, is what we as doctors, at what we as chiropractors excel in. And we're going to talk about the distinction, especially in there, between aligning towards being a therapy-based approach versus being the doctor giving the directions that are there. Obviously, reporting is about having the super skills of communication and using the tools like we've created within Insight Scanning to build this relationship of succinct. And we're going to use a term called MEGO, MEGO, which is sort of short for my eyes glaze over. The last thing we want to do is lose people in our rhetoric. We want to inspire people to come forward. And of course, that sets the stage for care planning, which means that we have a neuroplastic care plan, something that is based on objective findings. So we're not making it up on a 3-2-1 out the door principle. We're actually having a care planning experience. And of course, in itself, this care planning, because of the outcomes, but because of the professionalism and because of all of this incredible ability we have to be inspiring and to deliver the goods, it becomes the attractor in itself. And so the ripple effect means that if one person has an experience, their family is the next ripple, and the next ripple outside of that is their community of their neighbors and their coworkers. And before you know it, you have an entire community starting out. And I'm just going to say this because I'll forget it going in, but this is so darn effective, this whole principle that we built here. I built huge practices as I was getting into this whole process. And I can tell you that this is one of the hallmarks. And I was in practice in this one center for 30 years. But when we opened that practice up, there was myself on a corner on an intersection that was happening. And when I transitioned out and sold that practice and moved into the CLA world fully, there were 13 chiropractors on that corner. And that's the distinction that happened is that we changed this entire community based upon exactly what we're talking about here. So I'm very excited to share this because it's been my journey to get to here. So stage one, attraction. And you'll notice that what we really are doing here is attracting or getting the type of patients that you deserve. And what we mean by that is you have your own proper way in which you deliver chiropractic, but your passion is what's going to attract people towards you. So marketing and catching people's attention is making yourself visible in the community. We're always marketing. It's what you wear, it's how you say things, it's the marquee you have, it's the Instagram posts that you do, it's everything that you do in media and marketing. It presents who you are and what you stand for. And I just want to share this with you because this sort of gets into the team principle too. But when you're starting to build practices that turn into great businesses, one of the things that you can lean upon are your core values. And I don't know if I wish I'd have been taught this earlier, in my role as a chiropractic, practice person versus being a CEO as I am now. But we really sat down at the CEO level and worked with great moderators and otherwise who really forced us to focus on what the core values of the company were. And those core values really represent exactly what you stand for. Not what you could or should do, but they are the values that you value. And our very first value in CLA is chiropractors first, meaning we do what we do to allow chiropractors to experience the greatness of what chiropractic can deliver. I was giving a keynote and at an assembly at Life West, and it was one of those things that dawned on me where I said, chiropractic is waiting for you. Meaning, so often what we have to do is learn how the greatness of chiropractic can come about. But in truth, chiropractic is waiting for you, for us, to find out its power. And once you gain that certainty, if you will, that intensity that then this attraction just becomes synonymous with what's going on. And there's sort of an interesting, and maybe if you can sort of make note of this, however you are, but there's sort of a transformational guide that happens. And when we're starting to really learn new skills, but really put our intensity into our experience, we start to realize that in many ways we are unconsciously incompetent. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. And so you have to have an openness to sort of go, oh, okay. And as soon as we catch the aha moment of, wow, that'd be really something special to do. And I see this happening when I'm at TRP programs and otherwise, the light bulbs start to go off. And that means that you've taken that first step from being unconsciously incompetent to becoming consciously incompetent, which means that you now start to realize, oh gosh, I've got to do something. So you put yourself into a rhythm of making yourself, more effective, and then you become consciously incompetent, moving forward to becoming unconsciously competent. And those are the stages we want to get to. We want to get to it so that, like riding a bike, you don't have to think about what it is that pedal up, pedal down, and all the rest of that. It just becomes this relationship that you have, that you just know that you know that you know. And why is that important? Is because when you're in that state, attraction is instantaneous. It just happens. Now, one of the things of learning this whole model of becoming consciously competent is that you need to understand that chiropractic is not of the spine as it is of the nervous system. We are in the neuro age of chiropractic. And what that really means is that if we are focusing our message, our attraction, our examinations, our reporting, and our care planning on outcomes that are limited to the spine itself, then we're only going to have a minimal experience within chiropractic and in our communities. This is the distinction between having a rehab practice or rehabilitation to one that is referred to as rehabilitation. The nervous system forms intense habits. And as a consequence of that, when we examine the nervous system and we examine the spine and the nervous system, we can detect these patterns and we can detect these habits that have become embedded within the person. If we are a rehab person, we typically look at the two structures that associate with the layers of the spine, if you will, which are the muscles or the soft tissues working with the hard tissues. And so often our relationship of neurology in that realm is from what we know as the IVF outward. We tend to sort of think about the pinched nerve principle. But what we know within chiropractic and what we know within the neuroplasticity of the way that the world works, whether it's working through an episode or looking at the long-term potential of the human being in front of us, is that if we can identify where the patterns are, which we in chiropractic represent and refer to as the vertebral subluxation, then what we can do is release the tension that is associated with that and allow the body to express itself through a more complete nervous system. It's pretty straightforward. When you get that straight and you become unconsciously competent with that, then attraction just becomes so powerful and so part of the whole mix. So I invite you into the neuro age of chiropractic, and I invite you to have the time of your life understanding what we learned, and is that if we could add a technology that interfaced exactly with the chiropractic principles, but that allowed us to look deeper into the tone of the nervous system, then we could have it all. And that's why when we understand the power of the insight and understand that it is really building this model for you to organize your thinking and your attraction around it, then everything happens. And that's why, I mean, we have thousands and thousands of offices where, tens of thousands of offices have installed the insight. And what we know is that when you make the insight the hub of your practice, which means that the conversations go through the insight and out to the patient and through your examinations, it means that you are congruent at all times with the attraction and this life cycle we're talking about. The insight makes your practice stand out from others. It gives you the edge in the community, and so it gives you that talking point. It shifts the conversation from symptoms to function. We used to have a huge poster that we had, which was a distinction between feeling and function. And of course, for us, we understand that. We never dismiss the symptoms that someone is feeling. They're not there yet, and we empathize with them, but we don't get trapped in that model. We understand as doctors and as chiropractors that our role is to understand the dysfunction turning to function. And that's the impact that we have. We know that when we get this right, there are 4 generations for every person who walks through that door to be involved in this ever increasing ripple effect that we've started to talk about. The next stage is clinical excellence. And this is where I've spent my entire career, is either teaching chiropractors at the academic level. I have a research fellowship in sports and performance. So I've worked with some incredible athletes and performers over the years. I've taught tremendously in many different institutions and many different environments. And the bottom line is that we are amazing at what we do, and we just need to express that. The clinical excellence involves being engaged in the whole idea of looking beyond the symptoms and looking at their function. And that's one of the reasons that I spend pretty much the majority of my career developing technologies and developing relationships, so that we could do, just as you see on the image here, is that we can scan the most vulnerable in our society, which are the ones who can't speak for themselves. When we scan the nervous systems of newborns, of babies, of infants, of adolescents, and of super seniors, the realities are is that we're looking to identify where this intelligence within the body is not being able to be expressed fully. Why? Because the nervous system is how we interface with our life. Every freaking thing that's ever going to happen in your life is intersecting with your nervous system and the nervous system of all those around you. And so if there's clarity within the nervous system, if we can show where there are patterns of interference, then the next thing that happens is we can have solutions for them. And that's why clinical excellence is about understanding how to interpret scans. And we have an incredible learning model to allow that. First and foremost, we know that that you are doctors. And as a consequence of that, we know that we need to talk upwards to you and get you engaged in thinking bigger, but also delivering more clinical acumen. So we have a huge Insight Learning Academy that is constantly being refreshed and constantly developed, associated with the ever increasing levels of research that include the function of the nervous system, which now, of course, is including the function of the brain and the nervous system working together. One of the fastest growing sectors within chiropractic right now is looking at the neurofunctional relationship of behaviors in children. And without having data that we're collecting from the nervous system in a non-invasive functioning way with these Insight instruments, I can't even imagine how you could look at the functioning nervous system without having this as an experience for you. So I want to just mention here that I've mentioned before that we have to make decisions in our life, and we have to recognize that many times we get dragged down into this world of becoming a patient's therapist. And I don't mean they're psychologist. I'm talking about their physical therapist. That's what therapy is different than being the doctor and being the chiropractor. Being the doctor means that we understand the pathology of the subluxation. We understand the impact that it has. We understand how to analyze it. We understand how to put in play an adjustment that is going to arouse innate and allow the body to start a transformative change. We hire therapists that can take it from there, but chiropractors adjust to the subluxation. And to do that, we need to have the tools to identify where the subluxation is, how we are doing with releasing this and this tension, and how we can encourage the people to take next best steps. Examining the patient through the insight confirms that you are dedicating yourself to this assessment of their whole health, not just simply where they are experiencing the symptoms. That's a huge thing, because remember, we're not interested simply in having an experience to make them feel better. How does that build retention over a lifetime? Oh, call me the next time you have a problem. That's not very good for your business, but it's certainly not very good for them either. It's about building a relationship so that everyone understands that they will live a longer, healthier, and happier life with less nerve interference. And you need to be observing that at all times. And you observe it by having an insight exam. So I guess you're getting the idea that the neurological function, the retention, referrals, and reactivations of older patients are the statistical hallmarks of an insight-centric office. Once you embed this within the flow within your office, then you start to have all the tools for your KPIs. You can look and start to see where patients are coming in. You can start to look and say, this is how we have a role in which we can attract your family members in here. This is how we know that we set up a continuous recall model in case patients fall off. We don't just say, hey, we miss you. Are you having a problem? We say, we need to scan your nervous system on a progressive basis so that we can stay in touch with your health. It's just so easy to have a 4-generational experience when you do it right. So what are insight scanning technologies? Well, in front of you, you start to see that there is a 3-dimensional or 3-part scanning system. Why 3 parts? Well, if we could just look at one division of the nervous system and get an idea what the impact of the vertebral subluxation was, that would be great, but that's not how it works. There are different divisions of the nervous system, and there's local divisions, and then there are global divisions. And so we have what is known as an RED model, of where we build the R, which is we look at their autonomic reserve, which is what we do with the square box in front of you. I'll circle it right here. This is known as the neuropulse. And we do that by understanding the balance between their sympathetic and their parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. We then use that data to calculate their heart rate variability. And because we have been able to look at tens of thousands of patients over the course of time, we know a range under which a patient's well-adjusted nervous system should be operating as it relates to the ability to stay within a zone of not only activity within the autonomic nervous system, but balance within it. The next thing we do with this instrument here, which is known as the neurocore, is that we allow ourselves to look at the spinal motor nervous system, which is the one that allows our muscles to fire and allows us to maintain posture. So we do surface electromyography to gain a picture, if you will, of the tone of the central nervous system of the motor side, to allow us to understand whether it is exhausting itself or whether it is working itself to a highly efficient state. One of the most important things we understand is that when there are children, especially those who have behavioral issues like ADD, ADHD, we start to look at their expenditures of energy to just do simple tasks. And we can see what a difference it makes when we adjust them, that they just hold their efficiencies in a great place. And the third test that we do is from the spine itself, and this is thermography, which has been around within chiropractic for a very long time. This is known as a T4, or a 4th generation. It is an incredible piece of technology that allows us to look at the neurological controls from the spinal nerve that go to the end organs and glands. So we begin with an idea of how is stress impacting you and how has the body protected itself in the sympathetic or parasympathetic way. We look to see how the body is exhausting itself to try and protect itself in gravity. And finally, we get a chance to see if all of this stress and tension is tripping switches that go deeper into the patient's functioning health. That is clinical excellence. It's incredible, really. So there's the RED that I was talking about. Reserve, energy, and depth. And it matters that we do this because it keeps you so focused. And listen, if you have multiple doctors within your office, this again becomes the way in which you control the message between doctors, if you're sharing patients, but how the message of your vision of being a community-based practice is consolidated. And that's why so many doctors use this when they go to scale their practice for either gaining more associates or gaining new offices or gaining multiple offices in their network. We have networks of offices of where 20, 30 offices are using the same modeling that are in here in networks of chiropractic systems. And that gives them the ability to control and manage the messaging that's going out to the patients. Why? Because the reports that come out of this, and we'll go into that, the next system, which is the reporting, allows us to understand some incredible strategies. But before we get there, let's take a look at some of the what we call scan views that allow us to really understand or interpret the clinical evidence that we're getting. So we talked about the neuropulse, and that's where heart rate variability comes in. And you'd have to be under a rock these days if you weren't understanding HRV is in on everybody's mind, whether it's in fitness like Whoop or Oura Rings, or in sleeping, or whether it's looking in cardiology. Everybody wants to know what an HRV set point is. Well, what we did was we were able to develop a research model where we took 2,468 well-adjusted scans and understood on a well-adjusted model, and that was through other clinical applications, the doctors who were managing them said, yes, this patient has achieved a level of coherence. This green zone that you see in here is the chiropractic outcome accepted range. And that means that if you see this little white dot that's down here, it means that that patient, even though this is them at their resting state and their calm state, it means that their body thinks that they're in a calm and resting state. But when we measure their autonomic nervous system, we see that it is tilted to the left, out of balance, in this case to the sympathetic side, and they're low. It means that their activities or their reserve has become drained. But here's the best part, is that now that we know that, we can place them on progressive care plans. We can build the modeling that's associated with objective data and track them as they become not only feeling better, but functioning better and protected. They become less vulnerable. And we know that as people are less vulnerable, they have an experience that transcends far more than their experiences of symptoms. Well, the EMG studies are so fascinating. As I said, we look at the behavioralism that associates with them, but it literally allows us to take a look at the ability of the spine to support itself and to move. And really, EMGs, as we put it forward, are really an extension of these incredible sensors, which means these palpatory findings that you could use by your hands of palpating the paraspinals are actually coming to life right in front of you, because it represents the tone of the muscles of the spine. And this is why it's so important to have a spinal relationship as we're looking at the nervous system. And finally, we're looking deeper, as we said. We need to take a look and see if there are embedded patterns that are now going deeper into the patient's regulatory nervous system, which means that we're taking a look at their patterns of distress that are changing their organs and glands. So lots to know. And by the way, all of this is taught in our Insight Academy, which allows you to even if this isn't just familiar conversation with you, we train and teach you at all levels. And there are different layers of that training and teaching. We teach you to have a staff member learn how to use the technologies and have conversations with the patients that are real. And at the same time, we then train you to be an even more clinically excellent doctor. Well, we know that all of this is wonderful, but we have to report it to the patient. So stage 3 of the patient life cycle is communication and reporting. And so you can start to take a look at some of the reports that we deliver. They were created by educators. We obviously know that when we build language, it has to be understood. I indicated that we don't want to enter into what's called MIGO, which is my eyes glaze over. So often when reported findings are happening, or when there's this relationship with communicating what chiropractic is and what you're going to be doing, the patient blanks out. They worry about looking at what those gas bubbles are on their x-rays. They never hear the story. Well, the reports that we have are so powerful. And you'll notice that they're presented in an iPad format here. And that's huge. We rewrote all of the operating systems within the Insight to be applicable through the Apple model. Why is that important? Because you can airdrop, you can share, you can project, you can use all the Apple tools that you want to bring reporting real to the patient. You can share these reports through their emails. You can, as I said, airdrop them. There's so many different ways that you can engage the patient when you start to use this type of technology. And that's really important, because reporting keeps you on point as much as it keeps the message on point, and it keeps them understanding and inspired to see where the next level goes. You know, one of the things that we're so proud of is that we work with a lot of data scientists, and we work with a lot of this data that we collect. And what's fascinating about it is that we're able to look at the data from all three of those instruments at the same time. And what they tell us is that there is a level of efficiency that the nervous system should work through. In other words, if there's too much being spent or there's not enough activity and otherwise, in each of those three instruments, we can use that to create a single number, what's known as a core score. And the core score becomes a report card, so that the patient has a numerical number on their report card that says that their nervous system is operating at some percentile: 63, 75, 82, 54. These are conversations that you can ask the patient. And instead of saying, "How are you?" you can engage them to say, "I'm not satisfied as your doctor that you're still in the 60s with your score. We need to work together to keep unwinding the tension, and we need to get you focused on what you can do outside of this office to keep things moving forward." That's what objective data gives you, the power to create these report cards. And they're visual. They allow us to do not only initial scans, but there's actually 4 stages of the core score. There's an initial baseline scan, there's a progress scan, there's a comparative scan, which you see here. You'll notice that it publishes the previous core scores and the previous exams, so that the patients are constantly reviewing what it is that has been changing within their spine and their nervous system throughout. It's so exciting, actually, to hear and see, and I love sharing this stuff. But we didn't stop there. What happened was that we started to realize that we needed a new algorithm to look at a younger spine and a younger developing nervous system. So again, we leaned on our data scientists, and we now can produce a children's core score. And that's so powerful for parents, because they love the visualization. It doesn't talk about a pathology, it talks about a potential. Every parent wants to know that their child is moving towards greater congruency in their health and their nervous system. And the score gives them a benchmark that they can talk to and they can work with you as the doctor from. So I'm very excited about that. And as I said, we have this, thousands and thousands of offices are using this, and we collect so much data that's in here that all the time we're reviewing this data, and all the time it's a live experience to keep the data moving in the right direction, to give us what we want to do, which are new benchmarks and new abilities to present core scores. Well, the rubber hits the road when we get to the care planning stage, because as the patient life cycle begins, obviously there's an attraction, an examination, you've reported it, and now you have to offer a care plan. Remember, I use the term rehabilitation versus rehabilitation. Now you have a picture and an image and a score of what habits have become embedded within the spinal nervous system. And we certainly know that by releasing a habit within the nervous system of the spine affects everything from the brain to the sacrum, everywhere. Forget that. Everywhere. The behavior of the person is under the guidance of your hands. And so you want to be able to share the fact that you have different distinctions as to how you want the care plan to move forward. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer going on what is plan, can, ham. I can tell you a couple of things, is that care planning using the insight allows you more than anything to have the confidence to talk about the future. It takes time and repetition for the nervous system to learn a new way to function. It doesn't take as long to feel better as it takes to function better. And now you have the tools to go beyond what it is to feel better. And now you have the tools to talk about the functioning improvements that associate with being under your care. I think that's really important for me to focus on, because care planning is using this objective data to confirm the organization of each care plan, which allows the patient a higher degree of certainty. You're certain, the patient is certain, there's no gray areas. There are road signs along the way, and now you can point to those road signs and say, we're along the journey and it's going well. See, what happens is that when you have these tools, it brings the team approach into the way that you care for them. It means that your team is as engaged as you are in helping the patients maintain their care plan. Your team does not want to do retention calls and do, missed calls and recalls. They want to keep people on their care plans because it's so important. So team building is based upon having the vision come to life for everyone in the crowd. And that's exactly what the insight does, is it keeps everybody in the teams focused on it. And listen, when it comes down to it, patients who are inspired, who know that there's a confidence level, who understand that you are working from the objective data, building care plans and having communication with them, are going to be referring their friends, their family, especially their family, but their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers. And I haven't even gone into this, but once you get this straight in your centric hub, this is where you can go into screenings in the community or into corporations and do corporate wellness programs, because now you have a talking point that isn't about saying, how are you? Or we as chiropractors look to back care. We look at how the performance of the nervous system is changeable. See, that's why we want to have all the confidence to go into this. So I hope you're getting the idea of it. We're coming to the end of what I wanted to share with you today. And one of the most exciting things that I can do is, well, first off, I'm going to leave this up here for a moment, because I want you to, while you're going through this, use this QR code. And a couple of things will happen. Is that, number one, we love to take you down on a little bit of a quiz. And so there's a bit of a really fun journey that this takes you down to allow you to answer a few questions and understand where a practice blocker is in your mindset. There are things that are stalling you. So by all means do that. And also, when you use this QR code, I think it's like a 10-page workbook on this patient life cycle, which is yours for free. So all you have to do is engage. And remember, we talked about this whole idea of becoming, unconsciously incompetent. You don't even know that you don't know. Well, you're past that now from sticking it out through this length of the conversation. Now you might be, consciously incompetent, and I don't think so. We're all doctors, but I want you to become consciously competent and gain all the tools that you can in understanding what it is that we can work with you on, because we have a team of doctors, we have a team of support, of client support people, and obviously they're more than technical support, they're client support people who are just waiting to help you take the next steps. Keep an eye on insightcla.com. I want to wish you the most exciting experiences being a chiropractor. Enjoy.